here now, as it was, several people have got knowledge of young people.
Yes.
So it's a bit of knowledge about some people who've got educational background. And we had a few people who were brand new to the whole agenda completely.
Yes. As the same with here, we had Angela, who's the community garden, has a wide range of people coming in, some with strong health, and we've got Adam with the volunteers coming through, quite a wide range of volunteers coming through. So yes, it's quite a wide range of skills. I'm going back into my presentation. So safeguarding is about making sure that your organisation is run in a way that actively prevents harm, harassment, bullying, abuse and neglect. So that's the essential core of what it's everybody's responsibility. And it's your responsibility within your organisation to make sure that everybody's aware of what safeguarding is.
Okay, the presentation's not showing on the screen at the moment.
Oh.
We've got you, which is better than the presentation, but...
Sorry. Share screen. Is that better?
Yes.
So it's about making sure, yes, and everyone in your organisation, whether paid staff or volunteers, is essential, has a role to play in safeguarding, and it is embedded as part of your day-to-day activities. So from all the initial sort of equality and diversity policies that you have, confidentiality, whistleblowing policies, from the moment a volunteer comes to work for a member of staff, they need to be made aware that it's an extremely important part of what they do and what you do. So we seem to be going back to that still. So I now want to go on to the different terms of abuse. Is everybody aware of the different terms of abuse with regards to safeguarding? The 10 different terms of abuse was identified in the Act in 2014, the CARE Act. The CARE Act was about looking at how we deal with adult safeguarding, because adult safeguarding is different from children's safeguarding. And the main thing is that adults have a right to self-determination. The different terms of abuse are extremely important because they are recognised in all your safeguarding policy. We will look at that later. The terms of abuse are listed within that policy and are referred to by the main referral agency that you refer any concerns that you have to. So we've got physical abuse, which is signs of bruising, actually physical abuse that people might think is actually the safeguarding an issue, and they might look at that and say that is how we look at safeguarding, and this is all for adults over 18 and children who might be at risk, and adults over 18 who can't actually care for themselves, who we class as vulnerable, although everybody in some part of their lives will be vulnerable. So we can't class someone who looks vulnerable as vulnerable and somebody who doesn't look vulnerable as not vulnerable. We have to take that everybody could have a vulnerability, it must be looked at. Sexual abuse, well, I mean, with children, that may be more obvious with how they talk and what they come across with. It cannot be, but you might have more access to taking a very small child, the toilet when they're very little in a nursery setting. As people get older, it can withdrawal, can be talking about them being coerced, feeling at risk, abused by people who are stronger and older. And there's all sorts of things, that conversations that would be had. Within the learner workbook that I put in, as I sent, I've actually defined terms of abuse in more detail for you to actually have a look at. But these really are important that all volunteers who come understand what they could be seeing. I mean, psychological or emotional abuse, financial abuse, how people might be not in charge of their money. If you look in your workbook, you'll see that organisational abuse, neglect, self-neglect. You might have someone come into your organisation that's starting to look as if they're not as smart even, or not as well presented as they normally are. If you've got someone working behind a counter in a friendship cafe or a cafe, and they're coming and they're there and they know some Mrs. So-and-so comes in once a week, Mr. So-and-so, and all of a sudden he's starting to look a little less well kept or a little bit withdrawn, and they notice that. Why you make safeguarding important is that they notice and pick up on that, and then they know the procedure which way they go forward to explain about what that is. Domestic abuse, discriminatory abuse, and the discriminatory abuse, can I add, is in your equality and diversity policy. It covers the 9 protected characteristics: gender, race. Off the top of my head, I'd have to look at the policy: gender, race, age, all of those sort of things are protected in law and will be in your equality and diversity policy. So if you refer to the learner workbook at the moment, you'll see all the more in-depth descriptions of what these are, and modern slavery, which is people working as under slave conditions, not being paid a good wage and looking as if they're not, being looked after well. Why do you think, and I'd like someone to know, why do you think it's important for all organisations that all these forms of abuse and these safeguarding are understood and known to your volunteers who might just come and work 2 or 3 hours a week? And if there weren't any ideas, put your hand up, put it in the chat, or I'm happy to.
I think that's important because, especially for people who are working within the community and with a wide range of volunteers, you could be the difference between somebody getting help and support that they need and not. And I think that could play a huge role in somebody's life.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, the push through the policies is everybody's responsibility, safeguarding. And by you taking that responsibility of making sure your volunteers and members of staff, as you say, do understand, then that responsibility is taken on. And the other thing I think about, everybody who's a member of One Walsall runs a community group, a charity, or a community interest company, and it's all a social impact. So people often go to those organisations to feel safe, or to get help, or to volunteer, to take away from isolation. And so they are probably more open to maybe understanding the people who come through the door that might be under some sort of duress or stress, or themselves might be under duress or stress. And that's why they're actually coming out and volunteering, reaching out. So in fact, you're in a position where of extreme importance, because you're reaching to society that comes to you naturally, like you, Angela, with the community gardens, they come to help. And then you'll see very closely someone maybe slipping off the, unhappy, bruise, whatever, all the different forms. And it's also important, the different types of abuse. Financial abuse, understanding what that is. I've got a little scenario at the moment I'd like you to look at. So very quickly, we will look at adults and children's policies, but they're quite different for each. Children and adults face different issues, and the different definitions and terms are different. Procedures for reporting abuse are different, handling cases are different, and there's different legislation, so one policy does not cover all. I know all your organisations are different, but it's where we will support and help to make sure your policy, we do send a policy out, as you know, Dave, we do have our policy we'll look through, but we can make sure it's adaptable to your organisation, it works for what you do. But we highly recommend, obviously, 2 policies. And of course, if you have go for funding, the first thing they'll want to see is your safeguarding policy. I've got a little scenario here. It's about the adult's right to self-determination. So it's a tricky one with adults because they can choose not to protect themselves at all. The Mental Health Act of 2005 was designed to show how you could suggest or find out if someone has got the capacity to make a decision. So you might say to somebody, you need help. And if they have the capacity to make a decision, then they can say, no, I don't need help. So it's the conversations that you have and the organisations you bring in to help that person move forward. If they are not able to make decisions for themselves, that's when other agencies step in. But I'd like to look at this little scenario first, please.
Jane, you might need to put the sound on again.
Oh, sorry. Right. There's sound. Sorry, I have to do that. Yeah, and there we go. Here we go again.
We get a lot of regular customers in here. Most browse around, look for a bargain, others pop in for a chat. We get this one guy, Kyle, who comes in here with his carer. Same time, same day every week. He goes to the cash point over the road first, and then comes in here and usually buys something small and cheap. He's a lovely guy, always wanting to chat. Thing is, for a few weeks now, I've noticed that when he gets his money out, he usually pays with a £20 note. He's only spending £1 or £2, but his carer always steps forward to take the change and never seems to put the change back into Carl's purse. He just pockets it. Now, I don't know whether he sorts it out later, but it really does bother me. What if he doesn't? Should I report it?
If possible, before we discuss that, I'd love it to go back into some breakout groups to discuss, well, two things. What sort of abuse does he think he's being subjected to? And what could be subjected to Kyle? And what scenario, how you think you would actually tackle this? How would you like a volunteer in your group at this point to tackle this? And how can we make sure that they're aware of this being a problem, how they can take it forward? So, are you there, Julie? Julie?
I am, yeah.
Right. Could you put us in for just for 5 minutes into the breakout groups again, please? Just for a feedback discussion on this. Just for 5 minutes, Julie.
Okay. Arminder, I've given you an invite for room 1.
Yeah, it hasn't come up again. It's just a logo on a black screen.
Oh. Let me move you to room 2 and see if that helps. Anything?
No. I think it's the one Walsall logo on a black screen that's what's come up.
Not sure what's going on, sorry. Bear with me a sec.
back now. Are we all back?
Yeah.
Well, we had some interesting discussions about who it should be reported to. We talked about the gut instinct might be that something's wrong, but how do you have the conversation and where does it go? But as Angela said, it's a responsibility, and to go forward and to look at it and to discuss it. What happened with you, Dave? Do you have any interesting?
So in our group, the guys who'd had a previous experience around children's safeguarding, so that they would probably listen to Kyle. They wouldn't give him any leading questions necessarily. You know, they wouldn't question him about is this what's going on, blah blah blah. Just in children's, it's more a case they'll engage him in conversation and listen.
Yeah.
And if he says anything that raises concerns, obviously then they would sort of step in. But they'd be very careful not to put in any leading questions, because sometimes it might be tough. And they certainly wouldn't let Kyle know that they're concerned, because sometimes that can raise more problems. A couple of other people said that they might ring up the organisation and just say, you know, recount what they'd observed and see if that was normal procedure or not.
I was in which room were you in, Dave?
Room 1.
Who is in room 3? Anybody in room 3?
We've only got 2 rooms because there's 3 people that can't join for some reason.
Oh, that's a shame.
Well, we thought, Jane, it could be sort of, if there was abuse taking place, it could be, well, financial, but also some sort of emotional abuse as well.
Yes, it could be another type. I mean, I think we were talking about the conversations that could be had and the sort of tentativity of the conversation that would be had. We were suggesting that maybe we could go to the organisation, look if someone has a uniform on, but the whole point is, what shines, I think, from here is what's the procedure is. That volunteer that comes in for a few hours a week in the charity shop and helps, and spotted something he's not sure about, how much responsibility should he be taking on to report, or how much responsibility should be put within the procedures when he is taken on, recruited, that he understands how he goes through, how he reports and what happens, and who is in your organisation that maybe will take that and take that forward. I just want to share my screen.
Okay, number 12 wants to quit. He's got a hand up.
Sorry?
Somebody called Bird 12's got their hand up.
Oh, what would you like to say?
Thank you, David, for noticing. I just wanted to ask that, is it safe for you as a person who notices that something is not right? Is it safe for you to go ahead and try to dig in? Is it safe?
Well,
because personally, I think it's a little disturbing. You might press the wrong plug.
Yeah.
So is it safe to actually want to do the research on your own?
I don't think it is safe to do it on your own if you're a volunteer and you're a volunteer and you're working in a shop. But that's why we're going to talk a bit further on about maybe someone within the organisation is designated to deal with any concerns. Sorry, Dave.
I was just going to add that, yeah, I agree that it probably is not safe, and you know, the guys in our group, we said have a conversation, but don't lead the conversation, let them lead it. I think it's quite good. But if you start, in those circumstances, if you gave the person, the carer, indication that you were suspicious, it might make the whole situation far worse for Kyle, because, you know, the carer may then go to other shops rather than the one that you're in. And, you know,
Yeah.
the abuse may be made a lot worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If they think that there's potential that they might be found out, sort of thing, or they might be more, even more controlling over Kyle. So I think you're right. It does need to be observed, and if you can sort of find out a bit more without raising any sort of alarm or anything, just by sort of engaging with Kyle, do so, but not to the risk of Kyle or yourself. or alerting the potential perpetrator. But as Jane said, within the organisation, there should be a procedure or somebody you can go back to raise that concern. And that's what Jane's going to talk about shortly, that, you know, the procedures you need to have within the organisation.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if anybody's come across the Making Safeguarding Personal. Within the 2014 CARE Act, alongside the definition of the terms of abuse, there's also these 6 points that are also in the policy on how you actually deal with a safeguarding issue with an adult. Because the whole point is to take away from it to be, this is the case and this is the solution, to making sure that that person who's in the middle of that is centre and empowered to make a decision, and a considered decision based on the conversations that you have with them. So it's empowerment, prevention. It's better to take effect before something. Hold on, I'm just going to take that. Better to take action before harm occurs. Proportionality, the least intrusive response appropriate to the risk presented. So as you were saying with the conversations that you had. Protection, support and represent for those most in need. Partnership with services. It could be possible that the designated safeguarding lead could observe the situation after the volunteer raises concerns within the organisation with procedures that are set in place, and he knows that he can confidently go to someone. They could then observe, see the situation, and maybe look at the care home, report it, or have a conversation with someone in social care if they're adequately concerned, so that it's not a direct conversation. So it's working in partnership with other organisations, but it does have to be addressed somehow as a concern and accountability. So they're the Making Safeguarding Personal, and those 6 points also come into the policy that you adopt, your safeguarding policy.
Sorry, Jane, but I can't find the icon to raise my hand. I was just going to say, most places that I've worked in, there's some sort of reporting form. So as well as having that conversation and not leading the conversation, letting the person disclose what they want to disclose in the words that they use, normal procedure is you write down everything the person has told you straight away on this reporting form, and then give it to your designated safeguarding lead. So it's not just having a conversation and that's the end of it. Your next kind of step would be to actually note everything that was said to you using the words that the person used, you know, straight away while it's fresh in your memory.
I see, yeah, that's absolutely right. And on the safeguarding policy that you have within your organisation, at the end of that policy, there is always a referral form we'll look at. But you're absolutely right. Conversation should be noted down immediately and formally, as you say, so that is something to act upon. Have you had any suggestions, Suman? Have you had any sort of safeguarding issues you'd like to bring up, or feedback on that film?
I think it's just my experience working within education and doing community projects with young people. If a child has approached me and started a conversation, it's a case of not asking them, well, what happened and how did this happen? It's just a case of, like, you know, if a child says, oh, mom or dad gets really annoyed, it's more me saying, well, why do you feel that way? It's leading from what they've said and trying to explore how they feel and why they feel that way. You can never promise them confidentiality. You can never say this is not going to go anywhere. You can talk to me. You know, that's what we mean about no kind of leading conversations of promising things that you won't be able to deliver. And straight away we have safeguarding forms that you fill out as soon as a conversation's ended and hand them into your designated lead, and they take over from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose that's the difference as well between child protection and adult.
Yeah. The only thing that I do know is even when we've worked with the vulnerable adults with mental health charities, it's a case of it's not your position to decide whether it's a serious issue or not. Your position is that if it's ringing alarm bells, you note it, you raise the paperwork, and then the designated officer, because they're trained, they would be the people to decide whether it's a serious issue and it needs further investigation or not. But your job as a volunteer or a worker is that you make sure you follow that procedure and you log everything.
Yeah, Absolutely, and that's why it's important that what these conversations we're having today, that there is that procedure is embedded in any organisation you're running, so people do feel confident to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the definition of a vulnerable adult. And this is the difference between children and adult safeguarding. I mean, as you're saying, Suman, children and adults at risk can experience different types of harm and abuse. And many people don't understand why adults need safeguarding. The separate policies help to get the message across. The way abuse is reported is different. Organisations that make sure everyone understands the right steps to take. All adults, including adults at risk, have a right to choose not to take action. So there comes in the sensitive conversations that you were saying, Dave, in that room. And when you're safeguarding adults, you must consider the individual adult's needs in every situation. And as you say, Suman, with conversations with children, you can't promise confidentiality.
Sorry, I would assume the same applies to vulnerable adults, that, you know, in any kind of scenario like this, you can't promise anything really, because it's you have the authority of how it's going to be investigated and what will happen and not happen.
Yes, and it's the conversations you have as well with them, that they actually take responsibility. If they're capable of making a decision, they can make a decision whether things go further. So it's the more sensitive conversations and the agencies that get involved in those conversations that then decide to take action, maybe legal action, against an abuser.
So would I be right in thinking anybody that's working or volunteering with young people and vulnerable adults, it's kind of like the same procedure applies? We, you know, the company or the organisation should have a reporting form and everyone should know where to access it from. If anything's disclosed to you, you write down word for word what's been said to you, and then you pass that on and to the designated safeguarding lead, and they would take over and involve other agencies if need be.
Yes, so I think, yes, absolutely. And the importance we're saying at the moment, as you say, is that people and volunteers understand through how you embed procedures. And we're actually going to talk about that now, the different ways of evidencing knowledge, different ways of evidencing understanding and learning from volunteers that come through the door, to ensure that they do make these things, put these things in place, they know where to go. So your volunteer knows how to come, knows how to report, and understands the procedure that you just explained. For evidencing volunteer staff training, the designated safeguarding lead and your referral process is what we're going to briefly look at next. So I think we can either have a group discussion about this, or we can go quickly into groups again to look at the different ways that you're evidencing learning and how your volunteers are doing safeguarding and learning. I think it'd be nice to go into groups again, if that's possible, Julie. Dave? Hello?
That's fine, Jane. I'm just putting
Thank you,
it through.
Julie. you're back.
Yeah.
So how did you find that in your group, Dave?
Okay, so mixed. I think we had a couple of people who have got sort of policies and procedures. Mainly when people join the organisation, when they go through induction, they will go through the safeguarding policy at that stage. And then obviously if any changes are made subsequently, then it's the sort of manager's role to make sure that their staff and volunteers are aware of any changes, and that they're fully aware of what the current situation is. I mean, a lot of the guys in the group were very new organisations who hadn't necessarily got procedures in place, and that's one of the key reasons why they're on this meeting today.
Yeah.
I think from my point of view, One Walsall, as I was saying, we do it on induction, and we do it on an annual basis where we will go back. What we do is get staff members to sign that they've done the safeguarding course, or aware of safeguarding, so that you've got then proof that that member of staff as an organisation, you need to be able to prove that that member of staff has had that knowledge. So just saying they've done it without getting them to sign something probably leaves your organisation at slight risk. And I think, as Monica in my group said, it's about important that if the policies and procedures change, maybe to reflect changes in legislation, that you need to make sure your policy changes as well, and that also made aware again. And it's also useful, as I say, to update every year, because people forget. We've all got policies and procedures, and if you don't review them fairly regularly, you forget them. So it's safeguarding, but it's so important that you, at least annually, review that policy.
We were talking about the questions, leading questions, and how you question, and Simon was saying about the importance of having that trail from the person who comes in the door, a full understanding of recording everything that they hear and putting it forward to someone in the organisation who can then disseminate and work upon that information and work with it. So there's a clear procedure. For anybody who comes into your organisation, they know who to go to, and they know they can do it confidentially, and with that huge level of responsibility on their shoulders. Because if I was going to volunteer somewhere, I wouldn't want to feel that I had to take huge responsibility on, but I want to feel like I could send information somewhere. And yes, when I came to One Walsall, I was given full and everywhere, as you know, safeguarding training, which I had to sign off to and pass, basically. So ensuring that you have that embedded, and in every policy, it tells you how to ask questions. So at the end of the children's policy, it will tell you on that policy how to ask questions, how to approach a child, and what you can and cannot do. And in the safeguarding adults as well. So you'll have all that in your policy, but you have to make sure you disseminate it. I've got an interesting.
Jane, can I say one thing?
Yeah.
I think it's also important not just that the staff and volunteers see and read the policy, but they understand the policy. So maybe like you just mentioned there about maybe doing a test, a small exam, something like that. Nothing too onerous, but something that gives you confidence that the staff member or volunteer understands what they've read.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just reading it is not sufficient. They need to understand it.
As we say here, I think reading a policy is not evidence of knowledge and learning. It's essential to train upon induction, verification sheets accompany. And remember, in One Walsall, we can support you with that early training for volunteers. If you want any support or any sort of information that we